Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Escapement session. I believe this is the first session of today's ERC Congress. Happy you could join us. And well, we have quite a full program. As you can see, there's quite some panel members in today's session. So I would like to give the word to Hanno Tan. He is one of the project leaders of Arrest and the project leader of Escapement. He's working at the Amsterdam UMC, and he's been working in SCA research for over 20 years. And he will introduce the Escapement project and its goals and achievements. Hanno.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marike. I'm very happy for being here and to open this exciting session on what Escapement has achieved and what it is going to achieve. And you will hear those items in from the speakers after me. Can I have the first brief slide, please? Yes, so the achievements that we have so far and the goals that we have set ourselves are summarized here in the next 4 slides or so. So let me first start with the goals of Escapement. Escapement is a Horizon-funded project where 16 centers from Europe collaborate in studying sudden cardiac arrest. And the main goals are summarized here in the left and right column. Main goal 1, if I may say so, is to study the causes of sudden cardiac arrest, because you know that causes are very diverse, and we try to establish all these different elements therein in order to be eventually able to produce risk prediction algorithms for sudden cardiac arrest, and based on that, of course, in order to be able to produce preventive strategies. That's one of the columns of Escapement. And the other column, and that's the column that you may be even more interested in, is that we also study the resuscitation strategies for sudden cardiac arrest. We have several ways in which we do this. You will hear that from the next speakers. So I will not delve too deep into that. Next slide, please. So Escapement has started about 3 years ago. And we are happy that we have published already quite a few papers. These are the numbers and the site where you can find them actually. We have also numerous ongoing research projects that we have summarized in the research proposals that have been submitted, and that's more than 50. And the randomized controlled trial is part of it. And I'm also very happy to tell you that there have already been some spin-off projects emanating from the Escape Net. And one of them will start actually next week. It's also a European project, which is called PARC, which is an initiative to extend that network of researchers of sudden cardiac arrest beyond Escapement itself. And another one has started at the beginning of the year. It's also a Horizon project where it's called PROFIT, where sudden cardiac arrest in post-MI patients is being studied with the aim of deriving a risk prediction algorithm and treatments for that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are just a few examples of the studies that we have been able to publish so far on the various subjects. I'm not going to go into all of them or do any of them. So these, at least in red, you can see the themes, if you will, of at least these papers. And the next and final slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So, and we have also been doing some work on COVID, obviously, as I think all the world is doing. So this is just a very brief summary of or sampling, I should say, of the work that has been going on and has been published already. And with that, I'm very keen to hear what the other presenters after me are going to present. And also, of course, I'm very keen to hear your questions and your opinions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Hanno, for this presentation of the outline of Escapement. While I'm awaiting questions from the audience, I have some questions myself, which might be interesting for the audience. It's a rather big project with quite some partners, with although studying the same subjects, sudden cardiac death out of hospital, they are also very different. Can you name a few of them, well, the greatest pitfalls and the greatest obstacles that you encountered while starting up this project? And can you say something about what are the biggest factors that would give success to this project?
Yes, excellent questions. So yes, we have had some pitfalls. I think if I start with the scientific sort of pitfalls, the largest by far is the fact that when we started this project, we saw who else in Europe would be interested to join, and the people who have joined have been also collecting their cohorts of sudden cardiac arrest victims in fairly different ways. So the system of collection of data, but also the data that are collected, the contents of the data is different. It's not necessarily identical. Well, it has not been identical between any of the participating partners, which is logical. So the very biggest hurdle that we had to overcome scientifically is the fact that we had to harmonize all these data. And in order to do so, we have worked on code books to transpose the data from the individual cohorts to one harmonized data set. And that harmonized data set went into one harmonized database. So that database now has been harmonized, and that it has been filled with these harmonized data. It contains data of, well, more than 90,000 sudden cardiac arrest victims, and also genotype data, for instance, in addition to that, of more than 10,000 people who have suffered sudden cardiac arrest. So this has been a huge struggle, well, not struggle, it has been a huge work. It has been fun. But now that we have done this, I hope that this will be, this has been a big achievement, I think, the biggest scientifically, I think, of all what we did. And this is now the time to go and see what we can do with this large harmonized data set. Now, in addition to that, there have been other struggles, and maybe the one that but this is not unique. But this has also been an area of interest, scientific interest. The other struggle has to do with the GDPR. Of course, everybody of you has been dealing with issues surrounding GDPR, and maybe the issues that we had for our type of research is even more difficult to deal with in terms of GDPR, because we are talking about the people who have suffered sudden cardiac arrest and who are even unable to provide really informed consent for participation, to name just one example. So these have been additional difficulties that we had to overcome. At the same time, it gave us the opportunity to think about how to deal with this. And so one part of the Escape Net project also involves an ethics part. It's quite an important part too. And we have a dedicated work package and PhD student and very interesting studies on that part as well. So that is an answer to the first question that you asked, Marieke. And now I forgot your second question. Could you please repeat this briefly?
Well, my second question was, what do you think are the most important factors for success in such a big project? Yes. And also from the audience, from Jasmeet Soor. Good morning, Jasmeet. How do people join our collaboration?
Yes, that's a very important question. So the biggest success is, I think, enthusiasm and hard work and liking to collaborate with each other. That's a very open door, if I may say. But and that I'm very happy to say that at least from my point of view, this has been an outstanding property of this Escape Net consortium. We've been working this in this consortium, well, at least from my point of view, in a very constructive and very, very pleasant way. And this is important. And we have also, of course, this is a rather big consortium, it's true. So we have also invested in dedicated project management structure. We have also a website that has been the domain name is escapenet.eu is the website. It has been included in the online presentation, so you can find it there. And this is also the way in which you can express your interest in collaborating with us. And of course, we are very much open to collaboration. So this is a very good thing that you asked us, Marike. So I'd like to emphasize this as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the panel to Hanno?
Yes, Hanno, it's been a joy to be a part of the Escape Net project. I think it's very well, perfectly managed, and yeah, I think it's will contribute a lot to our understanding on out-of-hospital cardiac arrest research. One thing is gathering the data and get all the parties together, but a challenge is, of course, to have the database live further in the future and be open to other researchers to get the data. So, can you comment on that?
Yes, it's also a very nice, very good question, Matthias, and also I'm very happy to bring this up. Yes, so to start with the second, yes, we do encourage other people to be part of this initiative, and as I said on the website, you can as a first step get in touch with us through that website, and then we have also some procedures that we think works best for new people who want to join in this effort. This is very important. I mean, science is a very open thing. So I think that science can only proceed if everybody works together and if everybody can make use of each other's strong points. So I think we are very much aware of that. And as I said, we are very much open to collaborations. And yes, the first point, the continuation of the database, if you will, is also something that is of great interest to us, and this is also something that we are working on now. So as I said at the beginning, Escapement is a European funded project. It's a Horizon funded project, and some of you may know that Horizon projects typically last for a 5-year period, and that's not different for Escapement. So Escapement has started 3 years ago and is a 5-year project, so it will end, the funding period will end in 2 years. And of course, it is it has very high priority for us to be able to find funds that will allow us to continue this database that we have worked on so hard, and that is probably of so much value for sudden cardiac arrest research. So and we are working towards that now. And well, maybe if I can combine both questions, if collaborations from people who are not yet in Escapement may also help in achieving the goal of at least extending the lifetime and maybe of the database, and maybe even extending it, because it is obvious from the heterogeneity of sudden cardiac arrest and the fact that both the causes and also the treatments can be very much an individual's thing. I mean, with individual properties that determine outcome and also occurrence of sudden cardiac arrest. Arriving at a truly individualized treatment strategy for sudden cardiac arrest requires huge data sets. So expanding the data sets that we have is also a very important thing. So increasing the size of the data in the Escapement database is very important. So also for that reason, I think the collaboration with people outside of Escapement is very much welcome.
Thank you, Hanno. I have some more questions from the audience. Jacques Delchef is asking whether you're working with different guidelines writing groups, and if so, what do we think about the no control of only looking for breathing? I think the latter bit is perhaps a bit too specialized for your part in this discussion. And another question from Just Meet Store is, what impact did the COVID crisis have on Escape Net?
Yes, so maybe so in answer to that, excellent questions also again. So if I start with the last question, so what impact did it have? Yes, of course, not of course. For us too, I'm sorry to say that we did have also, we have suffered quite a bit from the COVID crisis. So we, in our work, we obviously need to be very much dependent upon the collaboration of people who can actually contribute the data to our data sets. And these are people in the field, the people who are actually having to deal with some cardiac arrest. So EMS services is just one example. And well, we all, at least in the countries that participate in Escape Net, but also other countries, we have suffered from this a lot, because of obviously the main interest during the COVID crisis has been somewhere completely different in treating COVID, obviously. So this has held up quite a bit of our work. Unfortunately, we have been granted an extension by the European Commission, because of course the European Commission also recognizes this problem. So now we had, like everybody else, hoped that the first wave would be it as far as COVID is concerned. Now there's a second wave coming up, so we don't know how it's going to be, but we'll see. We'll have to do what comes. We have to deal with what comes crossing our paths. In answer to that question, hopefully I did answer that satisfactorily. And then in answer to the first question, with which guidelines are we dealing with? Well, several members of the Escapement Consortium are in the writing groups of the ERC guidelines. Marike, you're one of them, Giuseppe is one of them, and the other people, if I don't think I forgot somebody else from the people involved here. Anatoly maybe also, I think. Anatoly also, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this is the first guidelines that come to mind when we talk about collaboration. In addition, I would like to also mention that ERC is part of the Escapement Consortium, is a partner in the Escapement Consortium, but so is, by the way, the ERA, the European Heart Rhythm Association. This may be a little bit less familiar to you, but the ERA is mostly associated with and deals with the causes of sudden cardiac arrest. So as I told you at the beginning, studying the causes of sudden cardiac arrest is one of the two pillars in the Escapement efforts. So and we also work very closely with the ERA.
So I have, thank you, Hanno. I still have one more question from the audience, from Michael Balbin. How does the Escapement Registry improve quality, and what are the aims to do so?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. And of course, what we strive for in Escapement is to actually not only do science for the sake of science. We do this in order to improve actually patient care. And as I told you, Escapement is a very broad initiative. So we are very much aware of the fact that there's very many aspects to the problem of sudden cardiac arrest. And we, in addition to that, we are interested in all of these aspects. I mean, because we are scientists and we are curious and we really like to know these things. And so we try to deal with all these issues. But as always in science, how does it change real life? This is something which we work for. As I told you, this is something which is a real objective of ours. But how does it work in reality? It's very difficult to predict, to be honest. So it's very difficult to predict what actually changes clinical practice immediately and what changes clinical practice in the longer term. If I may have an answer to the first question, what changes clinical practice immediately, maybe we should look then at the ways in which we do science on app-based organization of first responder treatment. And I think that we will have some talks about this. I think Julie is going to talk about it. And in addition, we also have, for instance, the Amsa Trial that Francesca is going to talk about later on, where we look at Amsa-based defibrillation strategies during resuscitation. So these are very practical and tangible things which can change clinical treatment in the short term. And then the other pillar about trying to understand the causes of sudden cardiac arrest in order to be able to design preventative strategies, that's maybe a more long-term goal. So, but what I can say is that all our efforts are focused on changing treatment and changing the quality of care for sudden cardiac arrest victims.
Okay, thank you, Hanno, for your presentation and the discussion we had. There's one, I wanted to wrap up, but there's one comment from Gavin Perkins. Good morning, Gavin. He says, great presentation. How much progress has been made with the DNA studies and how do you anticipate these will impact practice? Yes. And perhaps after that, we'll give the word to Matthias to introduce the next presentation.
Yes. Okay. So it's an excellent question. Also, so how we are now fully in the works in doing the DNA analyses, and there are several types of DNA analyses that we are doing. We have started now with common variant analysis, GWAS, in other words. Later on, we will also do rare gene analysis, rare variant analysis, so whole exome and whole genome sequencing. The reason why we did it in this order is that we wait for the cost. This is a very practical reason for the cost of whole exome and whole genome sequencing tools to come down even more, because they are already dropping quite fast, and we want to get as much bang for our bucks, so to speak. And what do we aim to achieve in practical terms? So I think there are several examples, but I think the easiest example and the most intelligible example, I think, is the pharmacogenetics example. So pharmacogenetics passport example. So you are all aware of the fact that some drugs may cause sudden cardiac arrest because they impact on cardiac electrophysiology. And this applies to several drugs, not only cardiac drugs, but all types of drugs, antibiotics, the hydrochloroquine that we all hear about, and also the azithromycin that we all hear about during the COVID. These are all drugs that are not cardiac drugs, but that still may impact on cardiac electrophysiology and thereby increase the risk of sudden cardiac arrest. The interesting thing is that this risk is not the same for everybody, because it is in large part determined by your genetic makeup. If you have gene variants in the ion channels that these drugs impact on, then your risk is great. If you don't have these gene variants, your risk is small. So it would be very great to know beforehand whether your risk is great or small, in order for the doctor to decide more easily whether or not you can actually get that drug. And in order to do so, it would be nice if everybody could be genotyped for those relevant gene variants. And in fact, this is something which is not science fiction. This is maybe not so far around the corner, because the cost for genotyping is very low. And also we are working not necessarily in Escape Net, but also beyond on systems to actually implement this in real life. So I think this is going to come somewhat sooner than many people will expect.
Thank you, Hanno. Matthias, please.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to introduce the next speaker, Iris Orving. Iris is a PhD student, is working at the Academic Medical Center in Amsterdam. She's also within the ARREST group, and she's in the perfect spot to tell us about how socioeconomic status related to outcome of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Please, Iris.
Thank you, Matthias, and a good morning to all of you. Can I see my first slide? Yes, thank you. So I gave a presentation about one of the Escape Net studies in which we aim to study the association between socioeconomic status of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest location and survival chances after out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in Europe. So for this study, we included both the North Holland province of the Netherlands and also the Stockholm region of Sweden. And of course, multiple studies have been performed based on this subject before us. But this study might still be important as our study region seems to have a lower inequality in income distribution if we compare this to all prior studies, at least according to the Gini coefficients. So next slide, please. Thank you. So for this presentation, we included only the Dutch cohort of more than 8,000 patients. And to measure socioeconomic status, we included the income level with quintile 1 corresponding to the lowest income level and quintile 5 corresponding to the highest income level. So we categorized income level into 5 different quintiles. And if you have a look at the figure of resuscitation characteristics, then we can see that public location decreases a little with increasing quintile. Witness status did not differ across the quintiles, whereas both AED connection and shockable initial rhythm did increase with increasing quintile. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this also applies to our outcomes. First, bystander CPR, second, any ROSC rate, and third, 30-day survival. Although the association with increasing percentage and increasing quintile seems to be mostly pronounced in bystander CPR, and it's only modest in any ROSC rate and 30-day survival. And also this seems not to be very linear in the final outcomes. Can I have my last slide? Thank you. So if we adjusted for the importance and significant variables, then we observed that bystander CPR still had a significant higher rate in quintile 2 when compared to quintile 1. Also, this applies to quintile 3, 4, and 5. But if we adjusted the association for both ROSC rate and 30-day survival, then we only observed a modest increase in quintile 5 when we compare this to quintile 1. But please just note, these are very, very preliminary results, and we have to confirm these results with at least the Stockholm cohort. And after this, we may have to perform some more extended analysis. So are there any questions?
Yes, Iris, I have one question. Now with you done this very nice study, of course it's preliminary results, but if you should apply what you know, your results, to an intervention, how would it look like?
Yeah, that is, of course, a perfect question. If these results are true, and again, these are preliminary results, and we have to confirm these results, but in that case, it seems that the association is mostly pronounced in bystander CPR. Also, we observed that AED connection rate is the highest in the highest quintile, so the highest income level area, when compared to the lowest income level area. So we may want to combine several interventions in the lower income neighborhoods. For instance, bystander CPR education in community centers combined with strategic AED placement. And we yeah, well, it's not that pronounced in ROSC and any survival rate. So I think we should go for the bystander CPR at first instance, at least, if this is true again.
Okay, perfect. Is there any other questions from the panel?
I have some questions from the audience. There is a, oh, there we go. There's a from Iris, from Jean Master. Good morning, Jean. And she says, can you tell us again at what level was deprivation measured, or socioeconomic status actually? You know, was it individual or area level?
Hi, Chauvin. Perfect question, of course. It's in this case based on the area level of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest itself. We would like, or we actually prefer, to include individual level socioeconomic status. But this is at this present moment not possible in the Escapement database, as it's stalled, for instance, in the Netherlands within Statistics Netherlands. In Sweden, it's still in Swedish statistics. But we, for this study, use the location of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest itself. So it's area level, and do not mix this up with, for instance, the location of the victim's residence, because that's also called often area level socioeconomic status. And again,
okay, so area level of the location of the cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, then there's another question that asks, how did you measure the income in each area? And also another question that was from Youssef Azeli, and another question from Michael Baubink. Says interesting preliminary data, but what was the average rate of public AED use? Do you know that?
Oh, for the final question, it's a great question, but I should look that up. And if you prefer, I can do that after this presentation, no problem. And for the income level, well, I should go. We have a perfect definition in the Escape Net database. Perhaps, Martin, you can come into this. You are probably more familiar with this to answer this question than I can.
Well, it's disposable income, household disposable income weighted by family size.
Yeah.
To make something like that. So.
Yeah, perfect. That's indeed, as Martin just mentioned, he is better in answering this question than I am, because he also uploaded his data for our project, but indeed it's disposable income.
Iris, can I ask you? Of course, there are differences between CPR rates and AD attachment, but for me, I mean, your results are quite evenly distributed among the income group. I would expect a little bit more of difference, or is the Dutch society the perfect society?
Yeah, of course. That's definitely the case. No, of course not. But you mean for AED connection rate, or did I get that wrong? Oh, you're still, I think you're muted, but it seems that you indeed, wanted to talk about the AED connection rate. Well, we observed that quintile 5, so the highest level of income, had definitely the highest rate of AED connection, but it also seems not to be very linear. It's something quite strange. Quintile 1, 2, 3, and 4 seems to have, a much lower rates of AED connection than quintile 5. So this is something that we have to confirm with the Stockholm cohorts, definitely, as it seems that it's not distributed, very even, if that will answer your question.
There's another question maybe related to this from Guido de Roy. He says quintile 3 has a lower bystander CPR, lower ROSC, and yet an increase in 30-day survival in comparison with quintile 5. Can you explain? And also there's another question from Andrea Tvofa. Was the income data based on real data relating to the patient or average data for postcode or residence? So perhaps you can comment a bit on the level of analysis.
For the last one, it's on average of the area. So it has nothing to do with the patient itself. So it's really the area. It could be that a very rich patient, so a CA patient, is in a very poor neighborhood. And then we have the average level of the area of the location itself, but not from the patient. To go back at the first question, can you repeat that question?
Yes. It's what you said yourself, that there's not a very linear relation, and also it's in quintile 3 there has a lower bystander CPR, lower ROSC, and yet an increase in 30-day survival.
I absolutely agree that this is a very good question, and I'm very confused about this myself, or we were actually very confused about this, but we were not able to have more variables at the present moment. We will be having more resuscitation characteristics and other variables in the next phase. And we have to look upon those variables and include those variables in our models to see what actually happened, as this indeed seems very strange that we have a higher survival, I think.
Higher survival and lower bystander CPR and ROSC. Yes.
That, of course, is an opposite thing. So there has to be another explanation, and another variable might explain this association. So we will be able to check this in the next phase, and perhaps we can identify the other variables, but also we can perhaps identify this if we combine this with the Stockholm cohort, if this may apply to our cohort only. If we combine these data, then it's gone. I don't know. It's just very preliminary, but it's a very good question, and we are confused about this as well. It should be explained.
Mm-hmm. So, and there's another question from Walter Renier, if I pronounce it correctly. Because in the Netherlands, bystander CPR is higher than in most countries, can these results be extended to other countries?
We hope to do so, at least if we include the Stockholm cohorts, although their bystander CPR rates are, I think, relatively higher than some other regions. But that's actually the most important reason why we do this study, as there have been multiple studies performed before us. So those results can be applied to the United States or can be applied to any other region. But this is specifically for, I think, the Scandinavian countries and also for the Dutch country, who actually have a quite similar system. So that we would like to confirm whether we find the same results as our prior studies did, or whether we find different results based on our own strategy, indeed taking into account that we have higher bystander CPR rates, but also I think we have a higher shockable rhythm initial rhythm rate, and also we have a higher AED connection rate. Probably, I'm not really sure, but that could be the case. So it should, for this case, apply to not entire Europe, I think, but at least to the Scandinavian countries and the Dutch country. So no, it cannot be extended to all countries. If that was actually your question, of course, I think.
And there's another question from Jasmine Sor. Is there an EMS system sweet spot for bystander CPR versus response time? Meaning, does longer response time is increased bystander CPR rate?
Well, perhaps, and although if I understand your question correctly, you will talk about the EMS response times. And in most of the prior studies, we did find a difference in EMS response time. So lower income areas had longer EMS response times when compared to the higher income levels. But we did not find any difference yet. Actually, it was quite similar. The EMS response time measured using call EMS to arrival of the first ambulance was 7.6 on that. In the lowest quintile, which was also 7.6 in the highest quintile. So we did observe no differences at all in response.
Yeah, because otherwise there might be an interaction between, you know, if the EMS takes longer to arrive, there's more time for the bystander to start up CPR. So there might be an interaction, yeah. And then Chauvin comments that they found a higher percentage of bystander CPR in more rural areas with longer EMS response intervals. So that might indeed happen. But the Netherlands is also a bit of a different country with not so many differences between neighborhoods as there may be in the United States or in Ireland regarding rurality.
Yeah.
So Iris, are there fewer AEDs in these low-income areas, or do the people who live there don't want to use them, or what do you think?
I'm not really sure, actually. I think that the Dutch Hartstichting would like to look into this. I heard something about a proposal that they wanted to have a look whether indeed there are fewer AEDs in the lower income neighborhoods and more AEDs in the higher neighborhoods. That's something they want to study, but I'm not really sure whether these results are published already. I don't think so. At least perhaps Marika knows. But...
Well, it's a very dynamic field, since also the Heart Foundation has a very active project in filling up the blank regions where there's no AED coverage yet, or at least AED registered in the AED registry. So there's some study to see where there are too few AEDs, but this is, it's a very dynamic thing, because if there are too few AEDs, they try to encourage people to get an AED there. So then it's not static.
Okay, do you have more questions from the audience, Marika?
No.
No? Okay, so if there's any more questions from the panel, or if Iris wants to add something?
No, I would not. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the relevant questions.
Okay.
May I have one more question? Sorry. Would it be an idea to stratify your analysis according to location? So public versus residential, and see if there is a trend there.
I do think so, definitely, since actually our public location seems to decrease significant with the higher quintile. So perhaps there is indeed some mediation effect or something like that. So we could at least stratify and look into this. Yes, I definitely do think that we should involve more in-depth analysis for this project to be able to explain some of the associations, as one of the questions came up from why is quintile 3 actually not showing lower percentages, which does not make sense, for instance. And by stratifying our analysis, I do think that we are able to explain more of such strange observations.
Okay, thank you, Iris. Then I pass the mic to Giuseppe.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Martin Jönsson from the Center for Resuscitation Science in Stockholm. And he will talk about the effects of dispatching lay responders. Martin?
Yes, thank you for that introduction. Can I see the slides? So this presentation is mainly about the problems in dispatching lay responders. And we have in our research group identified some of them. As you can see in these bars, if you look in the middle to call to dispatch, that's the important one. That at least in Sweden, that our first responders, including both firefighters and lay responders, are dispatched after the EMS. And that's not a good thing if you want to get ahead. If you see in the bars in the dispatch to arrival, you can see it's quite large difference between the lay responders and the EMS if they were dispatched at the same time. Next slide, please. Another problem is what I call compliance to instructions. These are survey results from a randomized trial where, to simplify it a bit, the blue group here is asked to run and fetch an AD, while the pink group are asked to run and perform CPR. And as you can see, there are differences in how they behave. The first bar, try to fetch an AD. 60% try to fetch an AD in the intervention group, but 42% try to fetch it in the control group, which is hard to distinguish the group when they behave about the same. Next slide, please. So it's hard to find any results in a randomized trial, perhaps, but if you look at if the system is activated, if we dispatch lay responders, we can see that we see positive effects on bystander CPR, AD attachment, or bystander defibrillation. And that's all the slides.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Is there any question from the panel? Okay, meantime, I have one question. About in your system, how are you dispatch lay responders?
We use a mobile phone app.
Sorry?
Mobile phone application, so a smartphone app. But it's the dispatch center who activates the app, but then you have, well, volunteers who have downloaded the app, and then they receive a message.
Okay. Are you dispatching them differently, so to go to the victims and perform CPR and others to retrieve an ADs, or?
Well, in this randomized trial, the Samba trial, the intervention group are asked to run and fetch an AD, and in the control group, they asked to perform CPR. But like in usual care, we haven't really gotten into that yet, and now we have this COVID problems. But I think it's Matthias can help me out here maybe, but I think among 5 persons, 4 are directed to an AD.
Yeah, exactly. The closest one is dispatched to go to the victim directly to do CPR. So at least one person for each incident is directed to go directly to perform CPR. So we try to ensure that someone always go to do CPR in both groups, but we have an overweight for AD to fetch an AD in the intervention group, because in Stockholm we've been using this lay responder applications for a long time, and it's more like considered standard care now, and we also have some effect on bystander CPR rates going up with this use of this mobile phone dispatch lay responder. So we couldn't leave out the control group as a blank. That's our opinion, at least. But I know from Copenhagen they're doing it otherwise with the blank control group, for example.
But the problem is not that they don't run and perform CPR. It's pretty much the opposite way, that most people try to perform CPR while maybe too few try to fetch an AD to get an effect on that, at least in Stockholm.
Did you have a very high positive response rate to the text message, to the call from the dispatch, I guess?
What do you mean positive?
So the lay responders who receive the text message for to be dispatched, I think most of them will get this mission and they will run.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think there are many questions online.
Yes.
Anatoly also has one.
Yes.
Okay, and Hanno, do you have also a question?
No, Anatoly, I believe.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin, for a nice presentation and data. And I have a question. If you know, how does your system behave in the moment when medical dispatchers recognize that the patient is not in cardiac arrest after the first responders have already been activated? Do you let them arrive at the scene, or does the system somehow stop them, or what is your experience?
There is quite recently a new function that you can, well, withdraw the call. But for a couple of years, we just send them out and then they had to run all the way. But now the opportunity is there to withdraw the lay responders.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can read some of the questions. So there are many. So the first question is asking if is it possible in Sweden to activate EMS and first responder in the same time?
Well, if we call the lay responders for first responders, it should be possible in the same way as the system works now. Now the system is activated when you dispatch the firefighters, but that could easily be changed. When you dispatch the ambulance, you dispatch the lay responders. So it should be possible, but there's potential negative effects that you send out in too many cases. You send out lay responders and they get tired of the system and so on. So I think there is some kind of trade-off here between early dispatch and too much dispatch, or what you said.
Okay. So now I'm trying to combine three questions. So what is the required training for volunteer? And so what qualification does a layperson have in order to register to the app? And finally, someone is asking if there was an impact from COVID-19.
I didn't catch the second question.
Is always related to the qualification of a layperson in order to register as a lay rescuer.
Well, when they register, they should have been doing a CPR course. They should be educated in CPR, but we have no way to actually check that. But we trust them that they have a CPR education. And we have definitely seen an effect of the COVID-19 because of they shut down the system. So there was no dispatch during the most intense part of the pandemic.
Oh.
So I don't. Matthias can help me out here again, but it's up now and.
It's up now. It's not the researchers who shut it down. It's the governance of the county, who actually both in the region of Stockholm and also in the big region of Gothenburg felt that it was responsible to send out the lay volunteers during the COVID pandemic, and that of course you can discuss that. Maybe Giuseppe, do you know how they did in the Lombardia region? I think they had it going, right?
Yes, actually, we also have a great impact. Well, at the time of the first wave, actually, we didn't have any possibility to find a lay rescue because we have a total lockdown in Lombardy, so it was not possible to have a bystander CPR. And besides that, we have also delay in regular EMS arrival.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's a lot of experience to draw from this situation during the spring, but it was locked down by the authorities, and now it's up and running again. So that's the answer of the question.
Yeah. So someone is asking if you have any data on the quality of CPR provided by the layperson.
No, we have not. That would be very nice to have, but we have no really good way to measure it at the moment. So unfortunately not.
Okay. And then Bibiana is asking, does the dispatch center have to activate the smartphone app separately to the dispatch or to the dispatch of the EMS, or is the app part of the dispatch suggestion?
It's part in Sweden. When you have a cardiac arrest, you dispatch first the ambulance, as you show, and then you dispatch firefighters in cases of cardiac arrest. And when you push that button, the lay responder system is activated as well. So that's how so they just push a button, and then the app is activated.
Okay. So then going back to the COVID situation, Warming Road is asking if did you train the layperson in COVID resuscitation?
No, no more than like general guidelines from the Swedish CPR Council that how to treat a cardiac arrest during a COVID pandemic. And for lay responders, it was compression only CPR who was the instruction.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then there are several questions about the GDPR and privacy issues related to the information that you send with the app.
Well, I don't think I'm the right person to answer this, but there is a like company who runs this app, and I know that they have worked a lot on this, but I can't give any good answers to the question. But there has of course been some problems with GDPR.
Maybe I can add something there. I mean, when you register as a user, you comply to all the terms and conditions, of course, with the GDPR and data protection and integrity, and give your permission to be positioned and to obtain the position of the mobile phone. That's of course that you have to agree upon when signing in. So it's not different from other this kind of location-based services that are used for commercial purposes.
But isn't it the problem that the location of the patient is shared with the rescuers?
It's quite a complicated according to the Swedish legislation, how what is a medical record, what's this information from a medical record, and when you dispatch first responders like firefighters and police, it's not according to Swedish law as a medical errand or a medical information. So the information of the victim can be shared as long as you don't give any information that's uniquely can identify the person.
Okay, well, there is a very active discussion in the Slido with a lot of questions. So I'll try to don't miss, but there are really a lot. So someone is asking if first you can re-clarify the definition of first responders that your presentation, and also what kind of equipment the first responders have with them.
First responders in this case is both firefighters and lay responders. So well, in the presentation, but mainly the talk is about lay responders, so civilians who run to help out in a cardiac arrest situation. And the qualifications is, well, the firefighters, they are, of course, educated in CPR and they have an AD with them. So they can give, well, basic life support and defibrillate the patient.
So do they have a question now related not to the lay person, but to the firefighter? Again, during this pandemic situation, are they provided with, I guess, with correct PPE and training on how to use them?
I'm not sure, but the guidelines from the Swedish Resuscitation Council was compression only for firefighters as well, if you're not like medical personnel.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I don't know how in practice this works.
Okay. So someone is asking, do you have data on whether bystander perform CPR by prompting mobile phone or voluntarily? So do you have a...
Well, we have this survey that some of the results are from. Then we ask them if they perform CPR, but in the register we can't differ between an ordinary bystander or a lay responder. So the answer is, in some cases we can answer that, but not all.
Okay. I think there were I guess we answered to almost all the questions. Then there is some discussion going on between the audience. So okay. So any other comment or question from the panels, or Martin or Matthias, do you want to add?
I can add one thing that's we are really scratching our heads about is that how to optimize the best algorithm for dispatch of lay responders, and that could be maybe something for the Escape Net later on. But I mean, should you send all the people to go to fetch an AD? And it also depends on the phase of the cardiac arrest. Is it the electrical phase or the circulatory phase, and what phase should you do CPR or fetch an AD, and what's the optimal timing for getting an AD? And that's something that we really want to look into in the future. Maybe also add some smartness into it. So dependent on where the location is and how far the EMS, the response time for the EMS and the availability of ADs in the area, then you could kind of tailor the response for every suspected cardiac arrest. So that's something that we really want to dig into in the future, and that also think there's a big challenge for these kind of systems to get even smarter.
Great idea, Matthias. I think we all witness now the beginning of something really beautiful.
May I ask one last question to Martin for your research project as well? So we've talked a lot about the system itself and how to improve it, which is the main goal, obviously. But for your research project to compare different European countries, do you think that you should take other system characteristics into account, and which of the EMS factors or other resuscitation characteristics should you take into account if you want to compare the outcomes of the different systems?
Well, I think this dispatch time is of importance in this case, that if you have a long delay to dispatch, then you can assume a smaller effect of the system. So I think that is important to maybe stratify on to see. I don't know the delays in any other country, But the plan for the Escape Net is to merge data from Escape Net partners, and hopefully we can answer the question if this system save any lives, because that's a bit of a power problem. So, but we have a lot of cases in the Escape Net database, and we have very good data to answer this. So that's the future.
True. And so one last question. We've had some previous experiences in working together with the Costa group, and we've experienced quite some difficulties. Although we thought our registries were really quite comparable, we found quite some differences. So do you expect that these differences in say local definitions of or local interpretations of differences and inclusion criteria, will they affect also the analysis of the first response systems, or is this a specific subset that we are looking at? How do you think this will affect your research?
Well, it all depends on how variables are related to each other. So if they're not very much different between groups, then it's that doesn't have any. It's not a very big problem. But of course, you should keep in mind that maybe to analyze every site separately, if the models behave differently, then maybe take that into account and figure out how to best do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And I think we can move on, and I give the space to Matthias.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe, and thank you for all the nice presentations so far. I would like to introduce the next speaker, who is Julia Samsø-Kjellby, and she's an upcoming PhD student, I heard, and now she's working as a research assistant at the EMS of Copenhagen. And Julie's gonna talk about AD density and out-of-hospital cardiac arrest coverage in European countries. So please, Julie.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction, and good morning to you all. As Matthias just said, our Escapement study is on AD density and OCA coverage across Europe. And I might need some slides. Yeah, and we can move to the next one. So a short summary of the project. We know that around the world, awareness towards ADs and AD deployment has markedly increased. And AD sales figures are high, but bystander defibrillation remains low. So in this European study, we wanted to research the AD density, which we will calculate as the number of registered ADs per 100,000 inhabitants per 1,000 square kilometers. We want to compare AD placement by looking at the differences in OCA coverages across Europe. And OCA coverage is calculated as the number of OCAs within 100, 250, and 500 meters of a registered AD at the time of event. And then we want to look at the AD organization. For example, is there an AD registry? Is it linked to the EMS, first responder programs, and so on? In the next slide. So for each of the participating countries or regions, we want to collect data on ADs and OCA data from 2018 and 2019. And each of the countries will receive a how-to guide on how to calculate OCA coverage. And we have chosen to do this in a program called QGIS. And then finally, we will also look at bystander defibrillation in each of the countries. So the next steps for the project are that we will share our work with all the partners. It's a research protocol, AD variables, the how-to guide. And afterwards, each participating partner will upload their data to the Escapement database. And then finally, we will perform the data analysis and hopefully write a good scientific paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for a nice presentation. You're also in the perfect spot for this kind of studies. I think your group in the EMS Copenhagen is world leading in this kind of research with AEDs and how to place them and the best bang for the bucks. So can you tell us a little about this study and how you're going to proceed and the expected results from it?
Well, hopefully we will end out with a really nice overview of the differences in AD deployment across Europe. We try to make an easy approach on how to do the OCA coverages. It was something that we had some problems with ourselves. So we wanted to do a guide on how to do it in the most easy way we could imagine to get as many participants as possible. So hopefully, once we distribute our material, we will get some really nice data. Yeah, and get a nice overview, of the situation in Europe.
And is the goal to have some kind of definition or some variables that are comparable, like out-of-hospital cardiac arrest incidents, for example, or VF incidents that you can compare different countries and settings?
Yeah, I think the main goal at first is just to sort of describe the current situation, but in the way we have defined our variables, hopefully there will be room to make some more comparisons between the countries.
Yeah, I think we need that some definition so we can compare different EMS systems and the coverage of the ADs and when we compare results from bystander actions, for example. So I think it's a great idea. Is there any comments or questions from the panel? Okay. I will try to. I also want to be able to ask questions from the audience. I think I've finally figured out how to do it. So I'll try with the first one from David Fredman. Julie, there has been discussions on AD density, like 10 ADs per square kilometers, beneficial for citizen responder programs. Do you have anything to add here?
I don't think I have any new information to add. I think the way we try to define our AD density, we wanted to both look at the numbers of ADs, but also take into account the population and then the square kilometers, just because we imagine that the regions we include in the study will sort of have different compositions. So some areas might be heavily populated versus areas with not as many people. So I think that was sort of our way to take that into account. So it will both be the number of ADs per 100,000 people per 1,000 square kilometers.
Okay. And will that also include accessibility or opening hours? And
Yes, a very, very good point, because in the OCA coverage calculation, we will first like to do just an overall OCA coverage, and then afterwards we'll take accessibility into account, just to get an idea of the loss of coverage. So that will definitely be a very important point in the project as well.
Okay. I have some questions here from the audience from Ibian Metelman, I think, if I pronounce it correctly. How do you make sure that all ADs are registered? Are the owners of the AD obliged to register?
Yeah, in Denmark, it's voluntary to register on the Danish AD network. It's recommended by the health authorities, but again, it's voluntary. And each year we do sort of a roundup of how many ADs were sold in the country versus the registered ones to get an idea of the percentage. But yeah, it's voluntary.
Okay, another question is what countries will be involved in this study, and what geographical boundaries will be using as Europe. So I think that's the same question, actually.
I think I'll just see, we have invited a list of partners. So far, we have had a positive feedback from Italy and the Czech Republic and Sweden, and hopefully more partners will be able to join.
The Netherlands.
And the Netherlands, of course, yeah. So I think that's where we are right now. In regards to the boundaries of Europe, I think each country or region will participate with a specific set of data regarding AEDs and OCAs, because it might not be available nationwide. And from the Danish side, we will use data from Copenhagen. So I haven't thought that much about sort of the big boundaries of Europe.
Okay, there's a lot of activity going on now, and there's a lot of people who wants to get involved in the study.
Yeah.
So
Great. Yeah.
how can they make contact with you if they want to ask you questions about this?
Yes, I would be very happy to answer questions. And in my presentation, my email is listed on the final slide. So you are more than welcome to contact me, and I can give you more details on the project.
Perfect. Luxembourg is now up to also want to contribute on this.
Great.
I think the Escape Net is widening its boundaries to all over Europe.
Fantastic.
Okay, any questions from the panel? Okay, so there's a request to show the last slide. Is that possible to show the last slide with the email address?
Yeah, then I can maybe share my screen. I will just try and.
So maybe to add to all the requests of entering the project, I think that would be brilliant. I think you need to have a AD registry, whether it's nationwide or region-wide, but at least have an AD registry of locations of ADs, and OCA registry for the same region, so you can connect both data sources.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point. So I hope I'm sharing my screen now, so you can see the email address. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. If there's no more questions, I would like to hand the word to Marieke for the next presentation.
Thank you, Matthias. And I would like to introduce Francesca Fumagalli, if I pronounce your name correctly. She's a medical doctor and a researcher from Milan, from the group from Giuseppe Ristagno, and she's been working on the Amsa Trial, and she will provide an update of the Amsa Trial.
Okay, I'm trying to share the slides, sorry.
We can also share your slides for you if you want to.
No, okay. You can see the slide? Okay, can you see the slide?
I can't see the slide yet.
Oh, okay. So. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
Oh, I see your desktop.
Okay.
Yes, here we are.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay,
No
my
worries.
topic. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Francesca Fumagalli, and I'm working in the Mario Negri Institute in Milan. And my topic today will be the Amsa Trial. I would like to give you a brief update about the Amsa Trial. As you know, Amsa is one of the most accurate predictors of the defibrillation success, as demonstrated in animal studies and in human retrospective studies. And the important results obtained in those studies led to the Amsa trial, that is a prospective control randomized trial. The chair is Giuseppe Ristagno, and the study involved Milan area, Bologna, and in Italy, and the Espoo in Finland. Our hypothesis is that real-time Amsa analysis during CPR may predict the success of defibrillation. So a pre-enrollment phase was expected in the protocol, and so all our initial efforts are focused on the training initially. And from October 2018 and July 2019, 50 training courses were conducted in the study centers, and more than 230 physicians, nurses, or residents are trained and certified. So far, 32 patients have been enrolled in the study, and the first patient was enrolled in April 2019. Unfortunately, the study faced a decreased enrollment rate due to the pandemic, of course, and also due to technical problems in the Amsa defibrillators. In fact, all the Amsa defibrillators presented the technical problems not related to the Amsa algorithm, but to, for example, Wi-Fi connection during the transmission of the data or during the ECG acquisitions. So thus, the defibrillators were collected back from the study centers and sent to the Seoul, US to solve the problem. And now it seems that the problem has been identified, and we are now waiting for the technical intervention. By the way, from a very preliminary analysis of the patients enrolled in the study, the approach of a CPR guided by Amsa might be successful. In fact, as you can see in the graph, the Amsa value is significantly lower in patients with no ROSC compared to patients that achieve ROSC. Furthermore, we analyzed the quality of CPR because all the Amsa defibrillators have a feedback system that gave us the information about the chest compression depth and chest compression rate. And as you can see in the graph, the chest compression depth remains suboptimal during all the resuscitation efforts, and the chest compression rate is adequate even if it starts to decrease if the CPR efforts is longer than 20 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francesca, for your presentation. I have one question already from the audience, from Rudy Koster. Good morning, Rudy. Can you tell more on the technical part of this study? What brand of AD did you use? What Amsa technique?
Okay, sure. We are using the X series defibrillators from Zoll with these defibrillators are optimized for the study with the Amsa algorithm inside.
Okay.
And also in the screen of the defibrillators are displayed the
Sorry, I can't hear you anymore, or were you?
Sorry?
Yeah, okay, you're back. I didn't hear the last part of your of what you said. Could you repeat that?
Okay, yes, I was talking about the quality of the CPR that are displayed in the screen of each Amsa defibrillator about chest compression depth and rate.
Okay, thank you. So I also had a question, if I understood correctly, but I may be wrong. In your protocol, if Amsa is lower than 6.6, defibrillation should be avoided. And if Amsa is larger than 15.5, then defibrillation should be anticipated. But what about the Amsas between 6.6 and 15.5? Because I think that the majority should be there. How does that work?
Okay, yes. Actually, in the protocol, so many patients have Amsa in this interval, and if Amsa is lower than 6.5, chest compression should be continued in order to increase the Amsa value. The whole algorithm is guided with these two thresholds of Amsa. I don't know if Giuseppe want to add something else.
Yes. Well, just to reassure everyone that we are not denying any treatment. So the cutoff level of 6.5 in order to avoid the defibrillation applies only for the first cycle of CPR, so the first 2 minutes cycle. After that, we deliver anyway the defibrillation at the end of the 2 minute cycle, but we keep going only with the possibility to anticipate the defibrillation if the Amsa during CPR reach the 15.5 cutoff level. Amsa is displayed also during the pause for ventilation, so we use a 30:2 chest compression ventilation ratio. And during the 3 seconds for delivery the ventilation, the Amsa value is already displayed, and we are able to see what we need to do based on the value. Then I just want to make a clarification because there was a question related to the device, which device we are using. Francesca said correctly that we are using the X series from Zoll, but this option is not available for the moment to all the users of the X series. These are specifically modified and registered to the European Committee for only for be used for these studies. So basically the algorithm is only in the machine. There are 32 machines that we are using for the studies, and it's not available for all the others at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe and Francesca. I have another question from the audience, from Naomi Kondo Nakagawa. Sorry. Thank you for sharing your preliminary data. How many CPR events do you have to have in the study? What is your preferred sample size?
Yes, is 388 patients.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Rudy Koster. He says, I understand the value of Amsa for prediction, but will delayed defibrillation improve outcome in terms of risk and survival?
Yes, as Giuseppe said, the point is anticipate or delay defibrillation in favor of high quality chest compression.
And do you also evaluate the shock success as an outcome in the Amsa trial?
Sorry, I didn't get the question, sorry.
Do you also evaluate the chance of a successful shock as an outcome in the Amsa trial?
Yes, sure.
If I may add something, reply to Rudy's question. Of course, we are aware that delaying the defibrillation might have an impact on success or resuscitation. But as Francesca said, if we don't defibrillate, we have to assure that we perform high quality CPR. And in any case, the delay apply only when we arrive to the patient. So on the first intervention, CPR or defibrillation, and maximum at the first cycle. So the total delay of the defibrillation might be up to maximum 4 minutes. And we all know that there are many studies on chest compression first, defibrillation first. Some in the Northern Europe, they keep going using the 3 minutes interval of chest compression prior to the first defibrillation. So this is a safe range in which there is no evidence that performing chest compression first or defibrillation first may be which one of the two interventions is more beneficial. And actually, with this study, we want to find a solution. So to tailor the first intervention based on the electrophysiology of the heart.
Thank you, Giuseppe. There's another question from Gregor Russo. He asks if he's correct that no feedback is used in the group without Amsa.
No, the feedback is used in both groups, of course.
And then we have another question from sorry, I can't pronounce the name. Congratulations for your presentation, and he would like to ask if there have been times where Amsa results comes in contrast with the current guidelines.
Actually, we don't know. The results obtained are still preliminary, and the enrollment is now stopped for the technical problem. So actually, we would like to proceed with that interim analysis at first, and then we can say something about the guidelines.
Yes, I understand. So I have a question myself. Might be I'm wrong, but we've seen in another study by Hulleman that Amsa is influenced by the presence of an acute MI. So STEMI was associated with lower Amsa, and there was an interaction between Amsa and survival. So in patients without STEMI, we saw that higher Amsa was associated with higher survival rates, but in patients with a STEMI, there was no significant association with survival. So now my question is, do you think it might be possible that in patients with a STEMI, Amsa might be lower because of the STEMI? And do you think this may be a problem for the Amsa-guided CPR group in the Amsa trial?
It's a very interesting question. Actually, I don't know. Probably Giuseppe want to add something, but
Yeah. Thank you for the question. This is a correct point. And for sure, the presence of an acute MI will affect AMSA values, which are expected to be lower. But first of all, when we decide for these cutoff levels, these cutoff levels were obtained from a large preliminary retrospective analysis from our patient in Lombardia. And these cutoff levels were calculated also having a role patient with acute MI. So are levels that should be okay for all patients. On the other side, I want just to remember that except for the first intervention, then we still deliver the defibrillation every 2 minutes based on guidelines. So if a patient has an acute MI and will never reach that high value of 15.5, anyway, we will get the defibrillation at the end of the 2 minute cycles. So this will not affect the final outcome compared to standard guidelines. And then finally, the presence of an acute MI is one of the secondary endpoints that we're going to analyze later.
Yes, that was indeed my question, whether you, but will you take acute MI as an endpoint, or could you maybe as a post hoc analysis stratify your results according to presence of acute MI?
Yeah. No, no, it has been planned as a post hoc analysis.
Well, thank you. Are there, there are more questions from the audience, from Jacques Delchef. In the beginning of a cardiac arrest, there's more chance to have VF, so a shock need to be rapidly given. So will AMSA be used for the second, third, or later defibrillation?
No, AMSA is used also for the first defibrillation. And in fact, we saw that initially AMSA is higher compared to the later defibrillation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from the panel?
Yes, I have a few questions if we have the time. First, I want to ask you how the randomization procedure is done. Is it within the AD, or is it old-fashioned envelope, or
no.
How do you solve it?
Okay, so the intervention are assigned to the ALS teams using a centrally generated randomization plan. And the intervention will be switching from one to other according to a predefined timing every 3 months.
Okay. My second question is that do you expect to see any changes in the AMSA after given drugs during the resuscitation?
Yes, sure. We already have an example of AMSA that became higher and higher after the epinephrine administration, for example.
Sorry, I lost. Can you repeat that last sentence?
Okay, so sorry. After the epinephrine administration, for example, AMSA values tend to be higher, and in these cases, shock are recommended. Yes, sure.
Okay. And the third one is, do you expect to have a lot of post-randomization exclusion cases? I saw that you don't include medical or non-medical cases, for example.
Actually, the main exclusion criteria is an AD shock before the arrival of the ALS team. But if the AD shock is delivered before, the ALS teams does not apply the Amsa protocol. So at the moment, we did not expect to exclude patient after for this problem, for example. So.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much, Francesca, for your presentation and the answers you could give. So I'd like to give the word to Giuseppe.
Okay, thank you again. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the last speaker, Dr. Anatoly Trular from the EMS of Radek Kralove. I hope I pronounce well, from Czech Republic. And he will talk about the proceeding of the Czech Cardiac Arrest Registry. Anatoly?
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. I will share my screen. Thank you very much for introduction. I'm medically responsible for the regional EMS service, which is, I would say, middle-sized ambulance service, one of the 14 in our country. And I'm very grateful for our cooperation within the Escape Net consortium that helped us to introduce completely new database software, which is currently fully working and is sharing all the information from the different sources related to our cardiac arrest patients. In the past, we had to gather the information from different sources, and it was very difficult to be able to produce high quality data, and it was almost impossible to export these data into short Escapement database, which is now quite easy for us. Implementation of the new software took a longer time than I expected, but currently it's still human dependent, but the database is working quite well. Just for your information, our service is responding to more than 50,000 patients, and just 1% of these calls are for cardiac arrest. So our teams annually start about 500 resuscitations, including 30 to 40 traumatic cardiac arrests. We managed to introduce 5 important system changes during last couple of years. These are those I would like to mention. We already talked about dispatcher-assisted CPR in previous sessions, and as I could see some comments via Slido, there was a question, I think, from Uwe Kreimeyer asking about how we are able to correct quality of bystanders during CPR. I think until now we were unable to do that, but recently we started testing of video-assisted, dispatcher-assisted CPR, and then we will see in the future how this new technology will help us to improve quality of CPR delivered from the bystanders. Regarding the outcome, the most effective systems we could introduce around the year 2016 were two systems of first responders that are partially overlapping. The most effective are certainly those who are carrying AD, so it means professional first responders, but also the system of lay responders activated via the app and SMS as a additional information for case that the internet connection is not working, are used also. All these people who are voluntary have agreement with the ambulance service, which was checked by the lawyers. They had to sign ethical codex, and they must have also valid ERC certificate of any level, which is something saying that they are really able to provide CPR. We do not allow to join just people who are willing to help us. The use of helicopter, we have learned using helicopter during the Princess trial. It helps mainly in shortening transportation times to the cath lab. The Ems personnel has much higher experience with treatment of cardiac arrest patients, so let's say 10-fold higher number of patients treated in this situation. And the team can also help to save single patients who have some very specific condition like hypothermia, hypovolemia, pulmonary embolism, and those who need transportation with ongoing CPR to ECMO even for a longer distance. This is a summary of the outcome from cardiac arrest in Trent. You clearly see that the changes, most of them that were introduced around 2016, has increased survival for about 2 more people saved per 100,000 inhabitants and year. So from around 9 people saved with cardiac arrest, we increased survival to 11. And in summary, I think that without the running registry, we could hardly see the effect of all these changes. I would be very happy if all the future publications on CPR and showing the outcome would be informing more information as the incidence than in percentage, because the incidence to me much more reliably shows how the system changes are working or not. And I think every system should clearly communicate the outcome data, not only to public, but also to our own healthcare personnel and politicians who are responsible for all those innovations in the matter of financial supporting, and such information, as you see, I think is very clear to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Anatoly, for this important presentation showing all the efforts that you are putting in this registry since 2011. Is that correct? I saw in your presentation that for the first responders, they were trained high quality CPR, including ventilation. So I was wondering if you can clarify better. So the ventilations are for all the lay responders or only for the retired EMS people, or you teach ventilation to everyone?
Thank you very much for your question. The off-duty EMS personnel has legally the same status as those volunteers who are lay people and are trained during CPR courses. And all of these people are equipped from the ambulance service by resuscitation masks. Many of them purchase ambubags from their own resources. So they should, and they are instructed to start CPR, including ventilations, mainly because they are used in the areas with longer EMS response times, and they arrived on the scene later than regular bystanders who initiate bystander CPR immediately after the collapse. We stopped sending alerts into this system during the COVID period in spring. Currently, we kept the system running with instructing all of these volunteers that they should not provide ventilations, and I hope we will very soon return back to full CPR they provide.
Thank you. Is there any question from the panel?
I have one question, Anatoly. I can see by the table of the effect of the systems that the cases that are given CPR by the EMS are also increasing through the years. Is it due to the bigger population in the area, or do you think it's a better registration?
In the table, I showed the CPR cases in the top, and it's explained in the pre-recorded presentation, showing survival presented as the persons, because it's highly dependent what you include in the whole. And if we looked in our annual reports, we could see that in some years there were not included traumatic cases. And I know that some ambulance services also do not include quite regularly such called or social resuscitations, or those cases where, for example, some paramedic teams without ability to stop already going CPR, and there appears physician staff team shortly behind them, they do not include these cases into statistics. So if you look just at the outcome results presented as the incidence, showing exactly how many patients are returned back to life per 100,000 inhabitants every year, it will be without these rather methodological mistakes.
Yeah, but my reflection is that maybe it's more interesting to talk about the cases that are not included, that should be included. Our experiences from Sweden is that maybe 20–25% of all the cases are not reported, and then there are quality checks that ensure that they are reported, but usually there are the good cases that maybe these they have been shocked by an AD from a lay rescuer and are awake at the time of the ambulance getting there, and therefore they are not recorded in the registry.
These good cases are included anyhow, because the data are now merged from the dispatch center, who knows exactly about these patients, and also from the ambulance service database. And those bad cases that would drop off, I think would normally not affect the outcome if presented as the incidence of saved people or those transported to the hospital.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So now let's see the audience. So there are many congratulations for your work. And then Rudy Koster is also congratulating for the 50% AD shock first. And he's asking, how did survival increase on shockable rhythm only?
Yes, we have very poor survival in non-shockable rhythms and asystole. And the main effect of first responders carrying AD is definitely in the group of shockable rhythms, because they get to the scene earlier. In the past, there were just occasional shocks delivered from the mountain rescue, and the first responder system currently is able to attach AD in, let's say, 25% of non-traumatic cases of cardiac arrest. And those numbers, about 60 shocks, are those shocks really delivered before the ambulance arrival. So it has the huge impact. And most of these shocks delivered are occurring in the areas with long response times. And our statistics show that the difference between the first responder and ambulance arrival is about 5 minutes.
Okay. Then Chika is asking about if you have data on applying AD pads only because the AD shock before EMS arrival is over 50, so she's wondering how much percentage of bystander tried to use an AD.
Pure bystanders are actually not using ADs at all. Most of these shocks as well as AD attachments were from professional first responders that use mobile ADs. Only a few cases were registered in the mountains, in the mountain hotels and long-term care healthcare facilities. But our region is quite small. We are mostly rural area, so our situation will be completely different to Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and other cities. And historically, in our country, there was very low number of publicly accessible defibrillators.
So there is another question similar to the question that Martin received before, and it's related to the ethical point and privacy regulation for the first responders.
We discussed this a lot with lawyers, and currently the Ministry of Health is preparing nationwide regulation on this as a recommendation for use of first responders around the whole country. So they were highly inspired from our system. And the information is going to the app saying just location as the first information. Once they accept the call, they receive additional information. And once dispatcher or they deactivates the alarm or ambulance service arrives on scene, all those data are anonymized and could not be visible to anyone anymore.
Okay, well, I have another also ethical question related to registry, because this is a problem that we have faced here in Italy, and it's related to the informed consent. So for example, here we have to request informed consent to survived patients, even also for a registry data acquisition. So I was wondering if also in your region, in a survived patient, you have to ask informed consent to collect this data.
As far as I know, it's not necessary to have some consent from the patient, and there is a law related to the emergency medical services saying that provider of the ambulance services could request information about the diagnosis and the outcome of the patients from hospital. But of course, there must be set some kind of cooperation and sharing these data with hospitals, which are currently completely different organizations than the ambulance services.
Yeah. Marieke has a question.
Yes, thank you, Giuseppe. I was wondering, honestly, first of all, congratulations with the results that you've achieved in your region. Do you plan to expand to a national registry?
It's quite difficult because all the organizations are collecting data in a different way. We could see that during both Eureka studies, and some regions were even unable to join even the Eureka study, which was a short-term period of data collection. And as we could see in the beginning, you must have some routine expertise in collection of data. Otherwise, there will be many misleading and missing information. And currently, as far as I know, there is no plan to establish a nationwide registry, which would need to be done from the Ministry of Health.
Yes, yeah, I can understand your problem. I have another question. You strongly advocate using incidences to report on system effectiveness. But if you look, for instance, in the Escapement project, we want to compare regions as well. Do you think that I looked at the Utstein template, and there they say that the Utstein comparator group is recommended as a comparator for system efficacy, and using all EMS treated cardiac arrests is recommended for system effectiveness comparisons. It's not stated here whether this is on incidences or proportions, but if you want to compare different systems with each other, what would you recommend? Using incidences of all treated cases, or would you recommend the proportions or maybe incidences of the Utstein comparator group?
I was always surprised how variable data came out from the Eureka studies in all categories. And to me, I do not have exact explanation on that. And I think that this might be one of the causes. If I know how data are collected in our organization, I think that those bad patients are probably not missing compared to those who survive. And if we leave their majority of those surviving patients and conclude or make conclusions and present the survival in incidents, I think variety will be lower than if we show it in the percentage.
Okay, I'm sorry having to interrupt you because
sorry, yes,
session is ended. So
yes,
the next one has to restart.
Yeah.
So I want.
Thank you all for joining us.
Session. Yeah.
And thank you for the audience to be so interactive, and thank you to all the presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.